Chautauqua 2011 is made possible by funding from the We the People program of the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Hello, I'm Angela Rice Beemer, here at the Germantown campus of Montgomery College for a living history program called Chautauqua. Chautauqua gets its name from Lake Chautauqua, New York, where the first Chautauqua was held in 1874. It's changed over the years, and today, Chautauqua is a humanities program where scholar actors portray individuals in history who've made a significant impact on the world. This year's theme is the American Civil War, a house divided. Tonight's Chautauqua character assumed the presidency of the Confederate States of America as divisions in the country reached a fever pitch. Tonight's Chautauqua character is Jefferson Davis.
I welcome you to my home, Bouvier. It is a nice prison, is it not? I have been a prisoner of the United States for over 18 years. 2 of those years in a Yankee prison made out of bars and concrete, and now a prison with beautiful walls and paintings, a vista of the Atlantic Ocean, and yet still a prison, because I'm the most despised man in this country. Despised by Southerners because some claim I lost the conflict myself. All by myself, I lost to the Yankees. And of course, to the filthy abolitionists of the Republican Party. I have always been the symbolic center of the evils they claim of slavery and the Confederacy. And for that, they say I'm a treasonous. I am now a patriot. I have always been a patriot. I have never been a rebel. I have never betrayed my country. Sadly, the abolitionist Republicans caused a civil war by betraying the Constitution of the United States. Now, I know there are some of you here tonight, and I graciously have brought you into my home, but I know some of you are of Republican sentiment, and there are a great deal of you probably abolitionists. I shall treat you with kindness and fairness of Southern hospitality. But always remember, hopefully you will see by the end of my little talk that your cause is damned, that you have destroyed this country. As I said, I was a prisoner of the Yankee hospitality for 2 years in Fortress Monroe. 2 years, where they decided whether they would charge me with the death, the murder, as they called it, of Abraham Lincoln, and if they would charge me with treason. For 2 years. For the first year, they did not allow me to see anyone. For the first 4 months, I was kept in a solitary confinement and not allowed to sleep more than 2 hours a day at any one straight time. I only had but 3 letters in and 3 letters out. It was 6 months before my wife, Verinia, had any idea whether I lived or I had died when they captured me. No understanding, no compassion. And another year, we sat there and just rotted, while Stanton and the other abolitionists and President Johnson decided if I'd be charged. Of course, they finally let me out when Horace Greeley and Gerrit Smith and even John Jacob Astor came forward and said that they would pay the bail to get me out. Now, the Yankees had only said in that last year, all I had to do was agree to be pardoned. I have never been pardoned and will never seek a pardon from the United States of America for being a traitor, because I am not now, nor ever was, a traitor to the United States. Let me keep that clear in your minds. I ask for no pardon because I have committed no crime. Well, perhaps there is a crime. I think back, when I look at Bouvier, I think back of my real home, Briarfield, the plantation I started in Mississippi. We had 1,500 acres, 900 acres of fruit, vegetables, and 600 acres of cotton. James Pemberton and I cleaned every square inch of it, removed every tree, every stump, every vine that seemed to dominate that place along the Mississippi River. It was a beautiful place. James ran it for me when I was in Congress and the Senate are off at war. James died. James, yes, for some of you, if you want to know, James was my slave. James was my servant since I was 16. James was my friend since I was 16. James' death struck me like a blow from my direct family, because he was my family. We were so happy there. Started in 1835, and for those years that James was there, a happy and contented place. We grew and grew and grew. At the end of the first year, there were 20 people who joined me. By 1860, when the war commenced, I had over 113 people, happy and harmonious, yes, happy, content. It was a beautiful time. I remember Renee and I would sit on the veranda, look at the sunset over the Mississippi River. But all that's gone. All it's gone. The money, the beauty, what was the South, it's all gone. All gone because the black abolitionists came forward and said that we Southerners and our way of life were not American anymore. That we had no right to be part of the United States. That we had no rights. Abolitionists like Garrison, Stanton, and of course, led by His Excellency Abraham the First. Let me say this. They have charged us with many things, with treason. Let's talk about that. The Constitution is very clear, though the Northerners would not wish it so. That was a compact that our forefathers bled and died for at Yorktown, at Brandywine Station in the cold snow of Valley Forge. Northerners and Southerners bled for that document on our freedom. And in the Declaration of Independence, one of the charges against the king is that he incited servile insurrection. If slavery had been such an evil, if it had not been part of the Founding Fathers' original idea of what these nations would become, why would you charge the king with the crime of inciting servile insurrection? And of course, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, declares that all other people not enumerated, and by that they meant Negroes, they counted as 3/5 of a person. By your own consent from John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and all the rest, Negroes had always not been citizens of the United States and not even a full human being. And I never thought that in my life. James, to me, was always equal to me in so many ways. Maybe better in some ways. Article 1, Section 9. Article 4, Section 2. I shan't list all the elements of the Constitution. Let's leave it with the 9th Amendment, the 10th Amendment, which says the powers not enumerated in the Constitution are left to the people and the states they reside in. Where in the Constitution does it forbid slavery? Where? And let's make it even simpler. Under the 5th Amendment, each and every one of us has a right to our private property. We may do with that property as we wish. We may take it wherever we wish to go, and that it cannot be taken away from us except through a legal proceeding and for a specific crime. Where in the Constitution is holding slaves a crime? They are property, no more, no less, or they were. More, they called me treasonous. The South, treasonous. Treason. Treason is in 1787, when the Northerners came and said already, they said, well, we're going to have these new Northwest territories, and we're going to have an ordinance for that, and we'd like to forbid slavery in that area. What did the South do? South said, it seems an acceptable compromise. And we compromised and allowed the end of slavery in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. In 1820, Missouri wants to come in as a state, and all the issue boils up in the North, whether or not there can be slavery there. And they come up with this line 3630 across the country to divide the slave states from the free states. And we agreed to that for the harmony of the Union. And this is treason. Same when California comes in 1850. The same with the Kansas-Nebraska Act in 1854. We supported the Union and compromised, even though each step along the way, those filthy abolitionist dogs tried all they could to destroy our way of life, demanding that we end a cultural practice that exists for over 200 years, that our lives were intertwined with. And they called us treasonous for compromising with them. And myself, I've been called a traitor. I've been held as a prisoner as a traitor. I'm still considered a traitor because they never pardoned me. A traitor. My grandfather came to the New World in 1700. My father fought in the American Revolution. My 4 older brothers fought in the War of 1812. I joined West Point in 1824. I wanted to serve this great nation. Now, I don't want to disguise anything. I will clarify my career as a soldier. Well, as a cadet, I was not what you would say I was the best cadet. I graduated 163rd out of 208. And I had 137 demerits in my senior year, which was exactly 137 more demerits than my friend Robert E. Lee earned in his entire career at West Point. But Robert E. Lee, my late friend, was the greatest man I ever met. You know, once Stonewall Jackson, who said to me, he said, not only is he a great man, but General Jackson thought he was actually Jesus come back. And he said that with sincerity. And if you spend any time with General Lee, you could believe it. But I went on from there into the military. Spent 7 years. Then left the military, fought in the Black Hawk War, and joined the U.S. House of Representatives for a term. And then the war with Mexico broke out, and I ran back to Mississippi and got a commission as a colonel of the Mississippi Rifles, a volunteer force, militia force. And off we went to Mexico. And at Buena Vista, along with the Indiana Volunteers, the Mississippi Rifles, fought a desperate fight against 10 times our number and threw back 4 attacks to great cost to all the men. We held the day. You know, this reminds me, a fella came up to me, a general, and he said, you know, Colonel Davis, we'd like to make you a general of the United States Army. How would you like that? I said, I won't. I will not. He said, why? You won't serve your country? I said, I do serve my country, but under the Constitution, I am a colonel in the militia of Mississippi. I am not attached to the U.S. Army, and you have no constitutional right to give me a status that Mississippi has not given me. So I remained a colonel. That general did not like me at all. But I served at Buena Vista, and then after the war, I ran for U.S. Senate and served a term in U.S. Senate, where I advocated the expansion of the United States. And then I joined the cabinet of my friend, Franklin Pierce in New Hampshire, when he became president. I became Secretary of War, modernized the Army, pushed for a transcontinental railroad, added more territory, a thing called the Gadsden Purchase, even created a Camel Corps for fighting out in our western territories. Did all this to expand the United States and the power of the United States. And then in my last 5 years after that post, I was U.S. Senator again in the run-up to the war, where I spoke so often to my northern friends, trying to make an accommodation, trying to find some way to stop those abolitionists whose only thought was to destroy our country. And these efforts, they call me a traitor. Where's the treason? North, my friend William Seward once said, despicably, I might add, and I told him so. He said there was a higher law than the Constitution, he said to me. He pronounced it all over the country. Abraham Lincoln thought of it too. A higher law than the Constitution. How do we have a civil society if one of you can decide on your own that there's a higher law than man's law? That the Constitution can be abrogated at any time because you believe there is a higher law. Higher law is nothing more than treason. And they spoke it openly. Abolitionists were proud of it as it dripped from their tongue. Despicable. And they charged us with all the evils of traitor. Now let me say one more thing, because I know there's some northerners here. And I know many of my southern friends have become scalawags, people who are southern in birth but northern in their point of view, have turned their back on the old way of life in order to make money from the northern industrialists. Let me say to you, slavery has been attacked for the evils of it. Well, let's talk about that briefly. My slaves, my people, were happy and content. We had a joyous home. How many of you northerners have visited a factory in New York City or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a steel mill today? Are the workers there happy and contented? Was it happiness and contentment that mailed bombs to leaders a few years ago? Was it happiness and contentment that caused Andrew Carnegie to shoot down his own workers? Happiness, contentment. Oh, you northern hypocrites. A good plantation was always happy and content. And there's further charges there that we broke up families in the South, that plantation owners intentionally ripped families apart. What has a northern factory owner ever done to help a family? Do they do anything? They only care about the Irishman or the Italian who walks in the door and how much work they can get out of them. Do they help them stay married? No. Now, Southerners, did some Southerners break up families? Yes, but if they were smart, they did not. Think of it this simple way, and the way it was at Briarfield. If you're married, and all you ladies know, single men are much more volatile than married men. And married men with children are quite docile. They have an interest, they have an investment in where they work. And most plantations operated that way. Carnegie Steel? Don't make me laugh. They care not for the worker. And you say to me, some have charged Garrison and Frederick Douglass have talked about the brutality and how we worked our slaves from sunup to sundown. Yes, we did, along with ourselves. And in the North, your factories, is not the average day still 16 hours, 7 days a week? But you're better than the Southerners, you abolitionists. And if your worker gets hurt, what do you do with that Italian or Irishman? You kick him out. You send him down the road because he's no value to you anymore. You want only to suck out whatever he has and leave him dead because you'll just get another one. In the South, we could not do that or wish not to do that. We had medical care at Briarfield. There was no point in working someone to death. Slaves cost over, a prime field hand by 1860 would cost over $2,000. What were they paying New York workers at that time? Like $1 every few days? We fed them, we clothed them. How many of you New York factory owners ever fed and clothed anyone except yourselves? And yet you call slavery an evil. I believe wage slavery is a greater evil. Wage slavery has all the worst of the capitalist labor confrontation. It breeds hatred. It breeds suspicion. It breeds violence and death. Slavery does not. Slavery is a higher form of capitalism as far as it would allow the master and the servant to coexist in harmony. There's no harmony at Carnegie Steel. The simple fact of it. And more than this, we all have a Christian duty, do we not? A Christian duty, an American duty, to look out for those who are least able to take care of themselves. In the South, our Christian duty was to educate and bring the church and the Bible into our slaves' life. We had regular Bible study at Briarfield, and yet I'm treasonous for that. Whereas in the North, they work even on Sunday. We never did. It is our duty to uplift others. You who own a factory or any business in the North, look in your heart and say you've uplifted anybody with anything more than greenbacks. You care not, except for more greenbacks. We in the South were family, and 200 years we lived that way. And then His Excellency Abraham first ascended to the throne, and the abolitionism was unleashed. 1861, it became clear. My wife calls it my martyrdom. But January 9th, 1861, Mississippi seceded from the Union. And that day, I stood up in the Senate and said goodbye to all my friends. All my friends in the North, I said, I hope we can remain brothers and friends. We have had hundreds of years of living together, and I am so sad that it's been brought to the end by this evil group of people. And I wish you well. And I departed. And some said, why are you departing? Mississippi seceded, you can stay. And I said, you do not understand the Constitution at all. I am a citizen of the United States because first I am a citizen of Mississippi. And nowhere in the Constitution does it talk about citizenship in any other way than through the state. Our loyalty must first be to our state. As sad as it might be, as horrible as it might be, to break the bonds of the nation. Now, worse came to me shortly thereafter. 2 weeks later, a rioter came up at Briarfield. I was set to just rejoin the Mississippi militia and become a military man to protect my home. And this rider came up all lather. He was a lather, the horse was a lather. And he brought me the inexplicable, unexplainable, unimaginable news that a group of men, when they created the Confederate States of America's Constitution, decided by a secret vote, apparently, that I would become president of the Confederate States of America. An honor I did not wish, I do not long for, I did not want at any time, because I knew what it would mean. Lincoln, His Excellency, could not leave us alone. We could not go our own ways. I wanted to. In my inaugural address, I said I hoped that the northern states and the Confederate States of the United States, or the Confederate States of America, could work together, that in our foreign relations with England and France and Spain, we would be united. But that we could work together in so many ways. But I knew it could not be. The abolitionists were so poisoned with their demigod desires to reshape the world and to trample the Constitution into their own image, into their own desires. And so we prepared for war. I will say now, my prison has also been because I grieve. I grieve for my 4 sons I lost during the war, but more, I grieve for all those women whose husbands did not come home, the countless children whose fathers never returned, or returned so horribly scarred and disfigured, they will never be the same. And I grieve for them. I grieve for the 600,000 men north and south in Yankee blue and Confederate chestnut gray. All those who died, and all those 400,000 more who were maimed and wounded in horrible ways. I had a woman come to me recently. She said, you know, we women of the South, and I'm sure it's the same for the women of the North, but she only spoke from her heart. She said, we all look at men and beauty differently now, because it's just enough to get a man with one arm, one leg, because so many of the men stumble about with none, or are disfigured in face and body. I grieve for that. But I will say now, before you, before God above, I swear, there's not one drop of blood from all of this carnage that stains my hands. It belongs all on King Abraham's hands. His Excellency caused this war. There are some things that are worse than being slaves to the rest of fellow citizens, to being second-class citizens, and it turned out the extermination of so many young men. You know, it's been said to me so many times, and I hear it said over and over, constantly, of how cruel the war was to Abraham Lincoln. He lost his son, and I feel sad for him. I lost 4. And then we both had it tough, I will agree. Being in charge of a nation in war is horrible. Being in charge of a nation in a civil war, as they called it, brother against brother, family against family. Stonewall Jackson's sister, his only relative, they were close for all their childhood because they were orphans. She quit speaking to him over the war. She became a Yankee and never spoke to him again. Never. There are countless stories and the horror of it. But yeah, the Yankees and Lincoln had an army. We had nothing. They had a navy. We had nothing. They had banking system. We had nothing. We had to create all of that. And we started with some limitations. The North had 23 million people. We had 9 million. 3.5 million of those were slaves. They had 3 times the railroad mileage, 20 times the iron, 32 times the guns, 50 times the factories. Still, we gave them a good fight because we knew that this war would come and would be on our soil, that the Yankees would come in under their abolitionist masters and destroy us. That's why General Lee became my right-hand man. He knew, as I did, that we had to fight an aggressive war because the war would be fought in Virginia more than anywhere. General Lee, I already mentioned what a great man he was. We had some great generals. General Longstreet, General Jackson. It took me a while to understand General Jackson. When I met him as a colonel, I thought he was insane. No, he used to walk around with an arm up in the air, and I asked him why, and he said because it was longer than his other arm, and if he kept it up in the air, the blood wouldn't flow to it, so it wouldn't get any longer. But he turned out to be a man of God and profound convictions of the cause. You know, when we formed the Confederate States, we had no political parties under our Constitution. And I believe we have become a band of brothers, and many of us acted that way. Lee did, Jackson did. There was no cause but our country's cause. They thought nothing of themselves at any time, as I did, and I felt all of us would. But of course, just like General in the North that Lincoln had to face, we had our share of croakers and cowards in the South. Pierre Beauregard, his greatest tool was slander, not his sword. He proceeded to talk more than he would fight, and what he talked about was only to backstab everybody else. He was one of those timid generals, too. If he faced a log, he'd only cross one if it was low enough to the ground. Joe Johnston, General Johnston, another one. He talked a great deal more than he fought. I used to send him letters saying, I look forward to the glorious victories he would present us. I kept sending those letters to General Johnston. Luckily, he departed for a while, and Lee and Jackson took over. We had our share of invaluable military insight, such as a group of colonels that came to me with a plan to get McClellan and his army when they were running around the peninsula of Virginia. They came to me and said, we have a foolproof plan. Now, I want to tell you how these colonels got started. You all know about some of our Southern colonels. They are colonels because they raised a group of men and appointed themselves as leaders. They are usually overly rotund men of limited political wisdom, limited intellectual wisdom, and absolutely no military experience. But they raised part of our army, and so they were colonels. Well, 3 of them came to me and said they had a plan that we would attack McClellan's force, a giant force of over 60,000 men. General Lee only had about 20,000. But they had a plan that we would attack them at night with 5,000 men and wipe them all out. I said, Colonel, how do you expect this to work in the middle of the night when you can't see? And they responded very clearly that, well, our boys are going to go over there naked. And when they meet anybody with clothes on, they'll kill them. Such was the wisdom I was confronted daily. I do not hold that to General Lee. General Lee, as I said, brilliant. His plans were always brilliant. And General Jackson, the audacity and greatness of that man, and his death was so lamentable and serious for us. Of course, the war started to go badly, but I wish to say one more thing when you think of His Excellency Abraham I. In the South, I put no community under martial law. Lincoln did, Baltimore, New York City. He told whole states that he would use military force to keep them seeing the way he did. That seems to be an abuse of the Constitution, does it not? I don't see that there's any law for that, but he did it anyway. And when he had political opponents, he had some arrested for speaking ill of him. Let me just say, if I had all Southern politicians arrested for speaking ill of me during the conflict, there wouldn't have been nobody left. Newspapers, you know, I did agree with President Lincoln in the idea that newspapers, men, should be one of the first to be given a gun and sent out to the front. Hopefully a weapon without ammunition, if you know what I mean. But the horrors of the war came through. We could not handle the financial difficulty. We never ran out of ammunition or hope. We started to run out of men and material and money. The greatest need of any war is money. Inflation in the South was 60% in 1861. In 1863, it was up over 400%. And just before Petersburg fell, I apologize. Just before Petersburg fell, it was over 600%. Bacon cost $9 a pound. Milk was $4 a quart. And flour, a 50-pound sack of flour that you could get for $1 in New York City, cost $60 in Richmond. And the horrors continue. We'd have bread riots, people fighting each other for a scrap of bread, people eating rats and whatever they could gain as they starved. And more horrors. The most filthy, execrable document in all of human history, the Emancipation Proclamation, when His Excellency Abraham I unleashed race war upon the South, where he said that slavery would no longer exist in the Confederate States. If you notice, he left slavery to be in the border states or anywhere his troops controlled. Was his concern the Negro? Or was his concern a diabolical, filthy, unchristian desire to unleash a race war? Black and white falling upon themselves to kill each other. Disgusting. And add the horror of Sherman and Grant and their march through the South. When General Lee went through Pennsylvania and Maryland, no homes were burned. No towns were pillaged. No women raped and people killed. Innocent civilians and their homes and lives destroyed. When they came through Mississippi, Briarfield, not only did they burn it down, they removed every stick and trace of wood. It looked as if a barren ruin, one of my people told me. Everything was burned. No desire to use it. No desire, if you care about the Negro and you just freed them. No desire to take the fruits and vegetables of the orchard and give it to those freed people. No, just a desire to burn and destroy it. Where's your conscience then? And the horror, as I said, of 600,000 men killed and another 400,000 wounded, a generation gone. But we could not hold on. And of course, in April, General Lee surrendered at Appomattox, and shortly thereafter I was captured and put under the boot heel of my jailers. And look at what has brought us today. Here we are years later. Reconstruction, they have called it. Look at the South. Destitute. Destitute for whites. I had nothing when I got out of prison. Nothing. Everything was gone. Everything I had worked my life for generations had worked for in the South, gone. And the Negro, destitute. No work, no food. So the abolitionists free the Negro in an enlightened move and then leave him out in the rain, out in the cold, uneducated, with no Christian effort to uplift them. Did they build schools? No. The concern was only to punish the South, to have their way. And the South became destitute and poor. And yes, the race war came about. The despicable, and I will say despicable, Ku Klux Klan. The race conflict, the lynchings. There are lynchings almost every day, one a day in the South. And the North has done nothing, has left us at each other's throats because they do not care about any Southerner, whether they are Negro or white. They wish only their total power that they now render mercilessly upon the South, leaving a people uneducated, giving the Negro the vote, but not the ability to understand what they were doing. And let's say it again. How many Irishmen were given the vote and made citizens by fiat? How many Italians have been given that? If they are so concerned about all the peoples of this nation, why have they done nothing? Why do they do nothing to protect the workers in northern factories? Why in the North is a Negro almost more endangered than he is in the South? Tell me how enlightened Abraham Lincoln was about the Negro as a human being. The despicableness of it all. Well, I must say that even though I've been showing the brunt of evil, I encourage all my friends, all of us in the South, and any of you who sympathize, that the past is dead. We must return kindness for cruelty. We must live a Christian life. We must now join back into this nation and make it whole again. We must defend the flag, and now it is not the stars and bars, but the American flag. We must do this, even while knowing and hoping, as I do, that in the future, this nation will look at what it has done and go back and rectify the unconstitutional evils of the last 20, 30 years. And now once again, to borrow His Excellency Abraham I's words, which are very good words, but were words only, but I believe they were true in their spirit, that we need to create a nation of the people, by all the people, for all the people. And not say, as I did in 1860, that our Constitution is for you of Indiana, who served at Buena Vista, but not for you of Mississippi, who served at Buena Vista. That you, Thomas Jefferson, Robert E. Lee, George Washington, James Madison, you men of the South and your heritage of 200 years, you're no longer part. You are despicable for everything you ever thought or did or bled for. But you Yankees, who committed the slave trade, who operate cruel factories, you're fine, you're citizens. That's not of the people and for all the people. And let me just conclude that I say to all my brethren and to all my northern brethren as well, and say simply, we must go through life doing the best we can for ourselves, but more, setting our paths to doing what's right and decent for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, thanks for coming back with us. I'm here with Doug MISHLER, who's just performed Jefferson Davis. Thank you for coming back to Maryland, Chautauqua. We really enjoyed it.
Always great to be here.
Phenomenal performance. Phenomenal.
Okay,
phenomenal.
thank you.
It's interesting character, but the performance was so very, very good.
Not the warmest, fuzziest man.
He certainly wasn't. He certainly wasn't. But I wanted to ask you, please finish this sentence. Doug MISHLER has a penchant for choosing characters that are...
Wow. Quickly off the top of my head, I like dynamic, complex characters. The more complex, the better. Lots of flaws.
Yes, and then we learn so much from that.
Yeah, as I said tonight and always say to my students, history's messy, and the messier the better. I think we learn from that because it challenges us to think, well, what would I do? What do I believe? Am I inconsistent? So hopefully it helps us as citizens, as human beings. Have
you learned something about yourself, sort of a deeper level of learning from performing the various characters you do? And you've got about, what, 9 of them or so?
Oh, that's actually, it's now 16 because I added a couple this summer. Mm-hmm. I've learned a lot about myself. I don't know how to say it. I'm more patient in many ways. I think I'm more open to different views now. I think I was a little fiercer about, well, this is the way it is. And now I hopefully am seeing both sides, because some of my characters have some real elements of them that I don't particularly like and don't agree with, but I'm trying to understand how they came to those feelings and what do those feelings or stances tell us about our nation and our culture.
What was Davis's management style like? What were the personal qualities that he had that affected his leadership?
Yeah, as president of the Confederacy, it was sort of a blend of a dictator, and a micromanager. He even got involved with captains being promoted and things like that. He was a horrible over micromanager. He often bothered Lee on the battlefield. He'd show up and Lee would go, Mr. President, go away, leave me alone. And he could be dictatorial and gruff. But at the same time, he also did a lot of currying of favor with politicians, because as I was saying at the end, it was very difficult for him to get a consensus, and he really did have to have states and state leaders join him. So he spent a lot of time outside the Confederate White House lobbying and politicking. So it's a fascinating blend, but he could be very imperious and sharp.
You didn't mention his family life. Could you tell us a little bit more about his family life, his first wife, his second wife?
Well, his first wife dies, rather quickly. I didn't really bring it up tonight. He loved her deeply, but it just wasn't wasn't to be. Verinia, he loved passionately. They had a very long life together. They have many kids, though all the sons die very young. None of the sons makes it to 21. A few of the daughters do, a couple of the daughters. So it's a happy life and a sad life. One of the problems is his devotion to public service kept him away from home from really 1835 to 1865. He basically is not home for 30 years. And Verinia did not want to go to Richmond and be part of the capital. She did not want to do that, but it was the only way to keep the family together.
What do you think Davis would say about the current relationship between the states and federal government?
Well, the danger always is taking someone out of their century and bringing them forward.
That's true. It's very true.
Of course, he's an unrepentant states' rights man, and he would still strongly, he is a product of his times and his culture. Now, without slavery, without Southern rights, if states' rights had been solved, who knows what he would be today? Maybe he'd be a liberal Mississippi politician. We don't know. But if he kept the same values, he would be very supportive of states' rights. He would loathe national health care, but he would loathe some of the other things, like the federal government getting involved with defensive marriage or other things like that. That's your state issue or a personal issue. And he was very much that. I think, so that's such a difficult question. Right. And almost, in a way, unfair, because we distort history when we do that, and sometimes distort how we view today.
Because we do change, and we do evolve.
Yeah, if he stayed the way he was, today, he'd be way past the Ku Klux Klan, a group he hated. He'd be way past that and his evil, and that's not the man.
Do you think that in his time, do you think he was a bit naive about slavery, in that he thought because he had a plantation that ran a certain way that it was kind of okay? He knew that there were some people that didn't.
Absolutely. He knew there were a lot of people. I think he believed there was an ideal. But remember, in the 19th century, mid-19th century America, there were people who believed, Unitarians believed you could become a perfect human being. Reformers all through the North, religious reformers, North and South, believed that we were starting to move towards perfecting society. And all we had to do was get rid of alcohol, or all we had to do was this, or have prison reform and education reform. So this whole idea of perfection was possible. And I think he really believed that it was a benevolent system if properly done. And he knew that some did not do it, and he did not agree with that.
Even though slavery goes against the idea of freedom. You mentioned so much freedom in your presentation. It's just sort of, it's not meshing, you know. He's got
No, one of my favorite lines is when he said, Lincoln wanted us to be slaves to the North, and we couldn't do that. We'd rather die than be slaves. And it's so inconsistent. Well, then how do you have slavery? And ultimately what he comes back with is a very unsatisfying answer that, well, blacks need us to help them because they're really inferior morally and intellectually to whites. So we're back to the racial dominance. And then, of course, when you get there, everyone else agrees with him too. There's so few Anglo-Saxon Americans who believed that any blacks were equal to them in the 1860s. William Lloyd Garrison is one of the very, very, very few.
another one of your characters.
Yeah, I always say a handful of whites thought blacks were equal in all ways. I mean, most don't. Theodore Roosevelt, my hero, didn't in 1920 or 1918. So,
what's next for you?
I don't know. They're talking about the War of 1812 for next year, and I said, hey, if you need a villainous Englishman who wants to burn down Washington, D.C., maybe I'd be your choice, or blow up Fort McHenry. Maybe this would be great. So I don't know. I haven't thought about it.
Again, there's something in the thread of the characters that you pick that would blow up things.
It's fun to be the bad guy. It's fun to just let your unrepentant side out and have people get mad at you. Something fun about that.
Thanks so much. We have enjoyed the fun that you've had with the characters, and you presented them very, very well.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Angela Rice Beemer. You've been watching Chautauqua, the American Civil War, A House Divided. Good night.
Well, it rained all day the night I left. The weather, it was dry. The sun so hot I froze to death. Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, now don't you cry for me. For I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee. Actually, I live in downtown Washington. Well, I had a dream the other night while everything was still. I dreamed I saw my Susanna coming up the hill. A buckwheat cake was in her mouth, a tear was in her eye. She said, I'm going way down south, Susanna, don't you cry. Oh, Susanna, now don't you cry for me, for I come from Alabama with a banjo on my knee.